Desperate, pathetic, and absolutely doomed to fail. The first wave was pure panic mode. Jaden, please call me. We need to talk. I can explain everything. This isn't what you think. Please don't do this to us. Classic Cheater Playbook, Chapter 1. Deny, deflect, and hope your victim is stupid enough to believe that what they saw with their own eyes was somehow a misunderstanding. I didn't respond. Camilla had been crystal clear about that. Silence is your strongest weapon, she'd said. Every word you say to her can potentially be used against you. Every word she says to you can potentially be used against her. Let her panic. Let her make mistakes. Let her dig her own grave with increasingly desperate messages. And boy, did she ever dig. By day 3, the messages shifted from panic to bargaining. I know you're hurt, but we can work through this. What we had was real, Jaden. Don't throw it all away over one mistake. I'll quit my job. I'll do whatever it takes. One mistake. Like 3 months of planning to defraud me was just an oopsie. Like accidentally putting salt in the coffee instead of sugar. But here's where it got really interesting. Martin started texting me, too. Because apparently when your affair partner's husband discovers your little scheme and lawyers up, the natural response is to reach out personally and try to smooth things over like you're all adults who can work this out over a beer. Jaden, I want you to know that what happened between Cassidy and me wasn't planned. It just happened. Right. It just happened for months with detailed text conversations about timing and financial strategy. Completely spontaneous, I'm sure. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. Ah yes, the classic I'm sorry you're upset that I deliberately hurt you non-apology. This guy was really hitting all the greatest hits of corporate damage control. I think we should meet and talk this through like men. Like men. As if there was some kind of masculine honor in sitting down with the guy who'd been banging your wife while she plotted to steal your house. As if this was some kind of gentleman's disagreement that could be resolved with a firm handshake and a mutual understanding. The best part? He actually suggested we meet at a coffee shop to clear the air. Yeah, let me just pencil in a nice chat with my wife's affair partner right between my therapy session and my meeting with the fraud investigator. I'm sure that'll go great. I showed all the messages to Tyson, who read them with the kind of expression you'd have while watching someone step on rakes in their own backyard. Dude, they have no idea how screwed they are, do they? Not a clue, I said. They think this is relationship drama. They don't realize it's a criminal investigation waiting to happen. By the end of the first week, the messages had shifted again. This time to anger, which was actually refreshing because at least it was honest. You're being vindictive. This is excessive. You're destroying my career over a mistake. I never thought you were this cruel. Cruel? That was rich coming from someone who'd spent months planning to financially ruin me while I cooked her dinner and asked about her day. But that's the thing about people who think they're smarter than everyone else. They genuinely believe that getting caught is unfair, like they deserve to get away with it because they'd put so much effort into the planning. The voicemails were even better. Cassidy crying, begging, explaining that she'd just been confused and scared about our future. Martin leaving these weird formal messages that sounded like he was reading from a script his own lawyer had probably written. I want to clarify that any relationship between Cassidy and myself was never intended to harm your marriage. Like marriage is some kind of third party that can be injured independently of the people in it. Like he'd accidentally rear-ended my marriage in a parking lot instead of deliberately planning to steal half my assets while screwing my wife on her office desk. But the messages that really got to me were the ones where Cassidy tried to rewrite history. You know, our marriage hasn't been good for months. We've been growing apart anyway. I was going to talk to you about counseling. Suddenly, our entire relationship was retroactively terrible, and her affair was somehow a reasonable response to problems I didn't even know we had. That's when I realized something important. She actually believed this stuff. She'd rewritten our entire marriage in her head to justify what she'd done. And now she was genuinely confused about why I wasn't going along with her revised version of events. In her mind, she wasn't a scheming adulteress who'd planned to defraud me. She was a woman trapped in an unhappy marriage who'd found solace in the arms of another man. The cognitive dissonance was actually impressive. She'd managed to convince herself that planning to steal half my house after I paid it off was somehow morally superior to just asking for a divorce up front. Like the elaborate deception was actually a kindness, sparing me the pain of knowing she wanted out until after I'd served my purpose as her personal mortgage payment service. Tyson found me one evening sitting on his couch with my phone turned off, just staring at the wall. "You okay, man?" "Yeah," I said, and I actually meant it. "I'm just amazed at how thoroughly I didn't know the person I was married to." "That's not on you, dude. Sociopaths are good at hiding what they are. The weird part is I'm not even angry anymore. I'm just done. Like completely done. She could send me 1,000 more messages and it wouldn't change anything. She could show up here with tears and apologies and promises to change and it still wouldn't matter. Because you finally see her for what she really is. Because I finally see me for what I really am," I said. And what I am is someone who deserves better than spending his life with someone who thinks love is a long-term investment strategy. My phone stayed off for the rest of the night. And for the first time since this whole mess started, the silence felt like peace instead of emptiness. There's something deeply satisfying about watching karma show up to work right on time, wearing a crisp uniform and carrying official paperwork. I'm talking about the kind of cosmic justice that makes you believe the universe has a sense of humor and occasionally enjoys a good revenge plot. Camilla had called me 2 days earlier with news that made my week. The papers are ready and I've arranged for service. Where would you like this to happen? Now, most people would probably choose the safe, private option. Have the papers delivered to her house, maybe her car, somewhere discreet where she could process the shock without an audience. But here's the thing about being systematically betrayed by someone you trusted. It changes your perspective on what constitutes appropriate public behavior. Her office, I said without hesitation. During business hours. Make sure it's when people are around. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Mr. Reed, are you sure? That's going to be public. Camilla, she screwed her boss on her office desk while I was home cooking her dinner. The public ship has already sailed. I'm just making sure it docks at the right port. I like your style. I'll arrange for service at 2 p.m. on Friday. Peak workplace visibility. The beauty of it was poetic justice at its finest. She'd chosen that office as the scene of her betrayal. So, it seemed only fitting that it should also be the scene of her consequences. Plus, there was a certain symmetry to the whole thing. I'd walked into that building as the oblivious husband bringing dinner, and now I was going back as the plaintiff serving divorce papers for fraud. I didn't have to be there for the actual service, but wild horses couldn't have kept me away. I wanted to see her face when she realized that her carefully planned exit strategy had just become her entrance to legal hell. Call it petty, call it vindictive, call it whatever you want. I called it closure. I parked across the street from her office building at 1:45 p.m. and waited. The process server was a professional named Dave who looked like he'd been delivering bad news for 20 years and had perfected the art of staying calm while other people's worlds exploded. He'd called to confirm the timing and location, and his instructions were simple. Find Cassidy Reed in her office on the 14th floor and hand her a manila envelope that would officially end her marriage and potentially start criminal proceedings against her. At exactly 2 p.m., I watched Dave walk through the glass doors of the building where my wife had planned my financial destruction. He was carrying a leather briefcase and wearing the kind of confident expression that said he'd done this 1,000 times before and knew exactly how it was going to play out. I waited in my truck, watching the building like it was about to explode, which in a way it was. Somewhere up on the 14th floor, Cassidy was about to discover that actions have consequences, that planning to defraud your husband isn't as foolproof as it seems, and that screenshots of text messages have a funny way of ruining your day. 20 minutes later, Dave walked back out of the building. He spotted my truck across the street and gave me a subtle thumbs up before getting in his car and driving away. Mission accomplished. The papers had been served, and somewhere upstairs, my wife was probably reading through legal documents that explained exactly how screwed she really was. But I wasn't done yet. I wanted to see her reaction for myself. I got out of my truck and walked across the street, through the same glass doors I'd walked through 2 weeks earlier with a bag of lemon herb salmon and the naive belief that I was married to someone who actually loved me. Frank the security guard recognized me immediately. "Hey, Mr. Reed. Haven't seen you in a while. Here to see Mrs. Reed?" "Something like that," I said, signing in on the visitor log. "Is she upstairs?" "Far as I know." Seemed a little rattled when I saw her a few minutes ago, though. "Everything okay?" "Everything's perfect, Frank. Just perfect." The elevator ride to the 14th floor felt different this time. 2 weeks ago, I'd been nervous with anticipation, excited to surprise my wife with her favorite meal. Now, I was calm with certainty, satisfied to witness the consequences of her choices. The nervous energy was gone, replaced by something that felt suspiciously like peace. The hallway was busier than it had been that night. People walking between offices, carrying files, having conversations about quarterly projections and marketing strategies, normal office stuff, which made what I was about to see even more satisfying. I could hear her before I could see her. Cassidy's voice, higher than usual, stressed and shaky, coming from her corner office. The door was open and there were people gathered around, co-workers who'd probably heard about the process server and were trying to figure out what kind of legal drama had just invaded their workplace. I positioned myself where I could see into her office without being obvious about it. And there she was, sitting at her desk, the same desk where she'd been kissing Martin 2 weeks earlier, holding a manila envelope and looking like someone had just told her that the apocalypse had been scheduled for next Tuesday. Her face was pale, her hands were shaking, And she kept reading through the papers like she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing, which made sense because what she was seeing was a lawsuit that demanded not just a divorce, but financial restitution for fraud, punitive damages for intentional infliction of emotional distress, and a detailed accounting of every dollar she'd spent on her affair. Martin was there too, standing behind her desk with the kind of expression that suggested he was finally beginning to understand that sleeping with a married woman wasn't just morally questionable, it was potentially legally expensive. He kept looking over her shoulder at the papers, and I could practically see the moment when he realized that his name was mentioned in several of the legal documents as a co-conspirator in the fraud scheme. What does this mean? I heard him ask, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. It means we're screwed, Martin, Cassidy replied, her voice breaking slightly. It means he knows everything. And that's when she looked up from the papers and saw me standing in the hallway, watching her world collapse in real time. Our eyes met across the busy office space, and for a moment, everything else faded away. It was just her and me, the woman who'd planned to destroy my life and the man who'd beaten her to the punch. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I just stood there for a few seconds, let her see that I was calm and controlled and completely unbroken by what she'd done to me. Then I smiled. Not a cruel smile, not an angry smile, just the satisfied smile of someone who'd finally gotten the justice he deserved. Then I turned around, walked back to the elevator, and left her to explain to her coworkers why a process server had just delivered legal papers that accused her of running a months-long fraud scheme against her own husband. I left her to figure out how to tell Martin that their affair wasn't just career suicide. It was potentially criminal conspiracy. I left her to deal with the consequences of thinking she was smarter than the guy who'd been cooking her dinner while she planned to steal his house. And I walked out of that building for the second time. But this time, I was walking toward my future instead of away from my past. You know what's weird about selling a house? It's not just the financial transaction or the paperwork or even the stress of finding buyers who won't lowball you into bankruptcy. It's the moment when you realize that what you thought was your home was actually just a building where you happen to store your stuff and your delusions about having a happy marriage. I'd made the decision 3 days after serving Cassidy the papers. I was sitting in Tyson's living room, scrolling through real estate listings on my laptop when it hit me like a ton of bricks wrapped in an eviction notice. I couldn't go back to that house. Not ever. Every room was contaminated with memories that had been retroactively poisoned by the truth about who I'd been married to. The kitchen where I'd cooked all those dinners while she texted her lover about exit strategies. The bedroom where we'd slept side by side while she planned to rob me blind. The living room where we'd watched Netflix and made small talk while she calculated how much my trust was worth in dollars and cents. The whole place was like a crime scene where the crime was my own stupidity. But here's the beautiful thing about hitting rock bottom. Once you're down there, you get to decide what you want to build on the wreckage. And what I wanted to build was a life that didn't include a single reminder of the 3 years I'd spent being played by someone who thought love was a business transaction. So I called a realtor. Not just any realtor, but Karen Martinez, the same woman who'd helped us buy the place 3 years earlier when we were young and stupid and thought we'd found our forever home. She remembered me, remembered us, and when I explained the situation, she didn't even try to talk me out of it. Jaden, honey, I've been doing this for 15 years, she said over the phone. I've seen plenty of divorce sales, and I can tell you right now that keeping a house just because you put money into it is like keeping a shirt just because it's expensive even though it doesn't fit anymore and makes you look terrible. So, you think I'm making the right call? I think you're making the only call that makes sense. How soon do you want to list it? Yesterday. I'll be there tomorrow morning with the paperwork. The next few days were a blur of staging and photography and open houses that felt like watching strangers audition to live in the museum of my failed marriage. Potential buyers walked through the rooms where my life had fallen apart, commenting on the hardwood floors I'd refinished myself and the kitchen backsplash Cassidy had picked out during one of our weekend trips to Home Depot. This is a lovely space, one woman said, standing in the kitchen where I'd cooked that final dinner. Very romantic. Yeah, I said, it's got character. What I didn't say was that the character was naive husband gets systematically destroyed by sociopathic wife, but that probably wasn't going to help with the sale. The house sold in 6 days. 6 days. Apparently, the market for 3-bedroom colonials with updated kitchens and recent heartbreak was pretty strong. The buyers were a young couple who reminded me of Cassidy and me 3 years earlier, full of plans and optimism and completely convinced that they'd found their happily ever after. I almost felt sorry for them, not because the house was cursed or anything, but because they had that same look Cassidy and I had probably had when we'd first walked through these rooms. That this is where we'll build our life together expression that's equal parts hope and delusion. But hey, maybe they'd actually make it work. Maybe they'd actually love each other instead of using each other. Maybe their marriage would last longer than it took to pay off the mortgage. The closing was scheduled for 2 weeks later, which gave me plenty of time to pack up everything I wanted to keep and figure out what to do with everything I didn't. It's amazing how much stuff you accumulate when you think you're building a permanent life with someone. Wedding presents we'd never used. Furniture we'd bought for rooms we'd planned to redecorate. Pictures of trips we'd taken back when I thought her smiles were genuine. I kept the tools, obviously, my workshop equipment, my truck, my clothes, and exactly 3 pieces of furniture. The leather chair my dad had given me when I graduated college, the coffee table I'd built myself, and the bed from the guest room because there was no way in hell I was keeping the mattress where my wife had probably been fantasizing about her boss while I slept next to her. Everything else went to charity, got sold online, or found its way to the curb with a free sign. The dining room set we'd saved up for, the living room furniture we'd picked out together, the decorative crap that had turned our house into what she'd called a home. All of it had to go. Not because I was being vindictive, but because keeping any of it felt like preserving evidence of a crime. The hardest part was the photos. We'd had pictures everywhere. Wedding photos, vacation shots, candid moments from before I knew I was living with a con artist. I spent an entire afternoon going through them, and it was like watching a documentary about someone else's life. There we were at the beach in Florida, looking happy and in love. There we were at my sister's wedding, dancing like we meant it. There we were on Christmas morning, exchanging gifts and acting like we had a future together. I kept exactly one photo, not because I missed her or missed what we'd had, but because I needed to remember what lies looked like when they were smiling at you. I needed a reminder that people can fake anything if the payoff is big enough. The rest went in the trash. Every single one. 3 years of documented deception straight into the garbage where they belonged. 2 weeks later, I sat in the lawyer's office, not Camilla's office, a different one that handled real estate, and signed papers that officially transferred ownership of my former home to people who still believed in happy endings. The check I walked out with was substantial enough to give me options, which was more than I'd had when this whole nightmare started. That evening, I stood in the driveway of what was no longer my house, holding the keys I'd just handed over to the new owners. The place looked the same from the outside. Same mailbox, same front door, same windows that had witnessed the slow-motion destruction of my marriage. But it felt different. It felt like someone else's problem. I got in my truck and drove away without looking back. Not because I was too hurt to look, but because there was literally nothing behind me worth seeing. The house where I'd been lied to, cheated on, and financially manipulated was someone else's fresh start now. And for the first time in months, that felt exactly right. You know what's funny about starting over? You spend so much time planning your dramatic exit from your old life that you forget to plan your equally dramatic entrance into your new one. So, there I was, officially divorced, financially intact, thanks to Camilla's legal wizardry, and completely homeless by choice, standing in the middle of downtown looking for an apartment like some kind of middle-aged college kid. The loft I found wasn't what you'd call luxury living, but it had 3 things going for it. Exposed brick walls that reminded me why I liked working with my hands, huge windows that let in enough light to make the place feel optimistic instead of depressing, and rent that wouldn't require me to eat ramen noodles for the next 5 years. Oh, and it was directly above a coffee shop called Grind Coffee, which sounded like either a great convenience or a guaranteed way to develop a caffeine addiction that would make my divorce settlement look like pocket change. The building was one of those converted warehouses that developers love to market as urban loft living to people who want to feel artistic without actually having to be artists. The kind of place where you pay extra for the privilege of hearing your upstairs neighbor's every footstep and pretending that exposed ductwork is a design feature instead of a cost-cutting measure. But it was mine. No shared mortgage, no joint lease, no our place that came with emotional baggage and bitter memories. Just my name on the lease, my deposit, my choice. After 3 years of everything being ours, the concept of mine felt revolutionary. I'd been living there for exactly 2 weeks when I first met Sierra Thorne. And let me tell you, meeting someone new when you're fresh out of a marriage that ended with fraud charges is like trying to date with a giant neon sign over your head that says, "Recently betrayed. Handle with care." I was coming down the stairs with a bag of garbage, because apparently one of the joys of loft living is carrying your trash down 3 flights of stairs to reach the dumpster, when I nearly collided with a woman carrying what looked like 50 pounds of coffee beans. "Whoa, sorry," I said, stepping aside to let her pass. "Didn't see you there." "No worries," she replied, shifting the bag to get a better grip. These stairs are a death trap when you're carrying anything heavier than a paperclip. That's when I actually looked at her instead of just noticing her as an obstacle between me and the dumpster. Sierra was probably in her early 30s with the kind of practical beauty that didn't need makeup to be noticeable. She had shoulder-length brown hair that looked like she'd run her fingers through it and the kind of easy smile that made you want to smile back without thinking about it. "You must be the new tenant," she said, setting the coffee bag down for a moment. "I'm Sierra. I run the cafe downstairs." "Jaden," I said, extending my hand. "And yeah, just moved in a couple weeks ago. Sorry about the noise. I'm still figuring out which floorboards creak." Trust me, after 2 years of running a coffee shop, I sleep through everything, including the espresso machine directly below my apartment. She paused, tilting her head slightly. Wait, are you the guy who's been ordering black coffee every morning at exactly 7:15? Guilty as charged. Is that a problem? Not at all. I was just impressed by the consistency. Most people's coffee habits are chaos. But you're like clockwork. She picked up the coffee bag again. Although I have to ask, black coffee? No cream, no sugar, no fancy flavoring? I like things simple these days. Something in my tone must have suggested that there was a story behind that statement because she gave me a look that was part curiosity and part understanding. Fair enough. Simple's underrated. That should have been the end of the conversation. Polite neighbor small talk, exchange of names, everyone goes about their business. But Sierra didn't seem to be in a hurry to end the interaction. And honestly, neither was I. It had been weeks since I'd had a conversation with someone who didn't know about my recent divorce, didn't want to discuss legal strategy, and wasn't trying to fix my life with unsolicited advice. So, what do you do? She asked. Besides drink black coffee with military precision. I'm a carpenter, mostly custom cabinets, built-ins, that sort of thing. You? Coffee shop owner obviously, but I also do some freelance graphic design when the cafe's slow. Keeps the creative side of my brain from atrophying. She gestured toward the building. This place used to be a textile factory back in the day. I bought the ground floor 2 years ago and converted it into the cafe. The owner let me have first dibs on the apartments upstairs when they finished the renovations. So, you've been here since the beginning? Pretty much. Watched this whole neighborhood transform from industrial wasteland to hipster paradise. She paused, studying my face with the kind of direct attention that suggested she was good at reading people. What about you? What brought you to downtown loft living? And that's where things got complicated because the honest answer was my wife was cheating on me while planning to steal half my assets, so I divorced her, sold our house, and decided to start over somewhere that doesn't remind me of being systematically betrayed by someone I trusted. But you can't just dump that kind of information on someone you've known for 5 minutes, especially someone who seems genuinely nice and probably doesn't deserve to have her day ruined by a stranger's relationship trauma. Life changes, I said, which was the truth without being the whole truth. Sometimes you need a fresh start. Sierra nodded like that made perfect sense. I get that. I moved here after my last relationship ended. Sometimes geography is the best therapy. There was something in the way she said it that suggested she understood more than she was letting on. Not the kind of understanding that comes from curiosity or sympathy, but the kind that comes from experience. Like maybe she'd had her own reasons for needing a fresh start. Well, she said, picking up the coffee bag again. If you ever get tired of black coffee, come down and try something with more personality. I make a mean maple bourbon latte that might change your mind about simple being better. I'll think about it, I said, and realized I actually meant it. Good. And Jaden? She was halfway down the stairs, but turned back to look at me. Welcome to the neighborhood. I think you're going to like it here. As I watched her disappear around the corner, carrying 50 pounds of coffee beans like they weighed nothing, I realized something unexpected. For the first time in months, I was looking forward to tomorrow morning's coffee run. You know what's really twisted about the human brain? Just when you think you've successfully moved on from someone who systematically betrayed you, just when you've built a new life and found someone who treats you like a human being instead of a walking ATM, the past shows up at your door like an unwanted pizza delivery that you never ordered and definitely don't want to pay for. It was a Tuesday morning, because apparently all the significant moments in my life were destined to happen on Tuesdays, and I was getting ready to head downstairs for my daily coffee ritual with Sierra. We'd been doing this dance for about 3 months now. This careful progression from neighbor small talk to actual friendship to something that felt suspiciously like the beginning of something real. She'd started saving me a maple bourbon latte every morning, even though I'd never actually ordered one. I'd started showing up 15 minutes early just to help remove the heavier supplies around. We'd progressed from standing at the counter to sitting at the corner table, from talking about the weather to talking about everything else. And somewhere along the way, I'd stopped thinking about Cassidy every time someone mentioned trust or marriage or the future. Then the doorbell rang. I opened the door expecting to see a delivery driver or maybe Tyson dropping by unannounced, but instead I found a cardboard box sitting on my doormat like some kind of emotional landmine. No delivery truck in sight, no signature required, just a medium-sized box with my name written on it in handwriting I recognized like a scar. Cassidy's handwriting. The same loops and curves that used to write grocery lists and birthday cards and apparently text messages about how easy I was to manipulate. There was a note taped to the top. Jaden, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I found these things while packing up my stuff. I thought you might want them. If you want to throw them out, I understand. I just didn't want to forget what we had, even if it wasn't real for me the way it was for you. See? See, even her apology was a backhanded insult. What we had wasn't real for her. But apparently she assumed it was real for me, like I was some kind of emotional simpleton who'd been genuinely invested in our marriage while she was running a long-term con. The nerve of this woman was honestly impressive. I stared at that box for about 5 minutes, debating whether to just throw it in the dumpster without opening it. Whatever was inside, photos, letters, mementos from our relationship, it was guaranteed to be either painful or infuriating or both. Why voluntarily sign up for that kind of emotional damage? But curiosity is a hell of a drug. And after 3 months of successfully not thinking about Cassidy, I found myself genuinely wondering what she thought was worth returning. What remnants of our fake marriage did she think I'd want to keep? I was still standing there holding the box when Sierra appeared at the top of the stairs, probably wondering why I hadn't shown up for coffee. "Hey, you okay?" she asked, taking in my expression and the box in my hands. "You look like someone just delivered you a live grenade." "Something like that," I said. "My ex-wife sent me a box of stuff from our marriage. I'm trying to decide whether opening it qualifies as self-harm or closure." Sierra had heard the basic outline of my divorce story over the past few months. Not the gory details about fraud and manipulation, but enough to understand that my marriage had ended badly and that my ex-wife was, in Sierra's words, a piece of work who didn't deserve you. "You want some company while you decide?" she asked. "I can make us some coffee and provide moral support / voice of reason." "You don't have to do that. It's probably going to be weird and depressing." "Jaden, I've been divorced, too. I know what it's like to get unexpected packages from your past." She smiled, but there was something serious in her eyes. "Sometimes it helps to have someone else there to remind you that whatever's in that box, it's just stuff. It can't actually hurt you unless you let it." So, that's how I ended up sitting on my couch with Sierra, drinking maple bourbon lattes at 10 o'clock in the morning while preparing to excavate the remains of my failed marriage. If someone had told me 6 months ago that this would be my life, I probably would have checked them into a mental health facility. I opened the box slowly, like it might contain something explosive, which emotionally speaking, it probably did. The first thing I saw was photos, lots of them. Wedding pictures, vacation shots, random candid moments from 3 years of documented lies. There we were at the beach in Mexico looking happy and in love. There we were at my nephew's birthday party playing the part of the perfect couple. There we were on our first anniversary exchanging gifts and acting like we had a future together. Looking at these photos now was like watching a movie where you know the twist ending. Every smile looked fake. Every tender moment felt calculated. Every expression of love seemed like an Academy Award-worthy performance in the category of Best Actress in a long-term deception. "Wow," Sierra said, looking over my shoulder at a photo of Cassidy and me at some work party. "She's beautiful." "Yeah, she is. Too bad her personality is uglier than a mud fence." Sierra laughed. "That's the spirit. What else is in there?" "Letters, cards I'd written her for birthdays and anniversaries. A ticket stub from the first movie we'd seen together. A pressed flower from some romantic dinner I'd planned. All the little mementos that people collect when they think they're building something permanent instead of being systematically dismantled by someone who thinks love is a business transaction." At the bottom of the box was a letter addressed to me. Not a note like the one taped to the outside, but an actual letter, multiple pages sealed in an envelope. "You don't have to read that," Sierra said quietly. "Not today. Not ever if you don't want to." "No, I think I do." I opened the envelope and scanned the first few lines. It was exactly what you'd expect. A long rambling explanation of how sorry she was, how she'd made mistakes, how she hoped I could forgive her someday. The same self-serving nonsense she'd been texting me for weeks after I served her the papers. But here's the thing about closure. It's not about forgiveness or understanding or even moving on. It's about finally seeing something clearly for what it really is. And what I saw looking at that box of memories and reading that letter was the complete and total absence of anything worth keeping. These weren't mementos of a real relationship. They were props from an elaborate performance that I'd been too trusting to recognize as fiction. The photos showed moments that had felt real to me, but were just acting exercises for her. The letters I'd written were genuine expressions of love sent to someone who was calculating their monetary value. "You know what's funny?" I said to Sierra, closing the letter without finishing it. "I thought this would hurt more." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I thought seeing all this stuff would make me sad or angry or nostalgic or something, but it doesn't. It just looks like evidence from someone else's life." I picked up one photo, a selfie we'd taken on Christmas morning. Both of us smiling at the camera like we were the happiest couple in the world, and really looked at it for the first time since everything fell apart. "I'm keeping this one," I said. "Really? Why?" "Because I need to remember what a lie looks like when it's smiling at you. I need to remember that people can fake anything if the payoff is big enough." I put the photo aside and started putting everything else back in the box. "The rest of this can go in the trash." "Are you sure, Sierra?" I looked at her. You can't rebuild your life while you're still carrying around the wreckage of your old one. I spent 3 years building something with someone who was never really there. I'm not going to spend the next 3 years mourning something that was never real. I closed the box and set it by the door. Later, I'll take it down to the dumpster where it belongs. But right now, I have something more important to do. Wait here, I told Sierra and went to my workshop. I came back with a small wooden box I've been working on for the past month. It was made from reclaimed barnwood with dovetail joints and a brass latch. The kind of craftsmanship that takes time and patience and genuine care. What's this? Sierra asked. This is for the things that actually matter, I said, opening the box to show her what was inside. The lease to this apartment, the business cards from my new clients, a photo of me and Tyson from last weekend, the receipt from our first real date last week. Sierra smiled, understanding immediately. You're starting a new collection. I'm starting a new life. And this time, I'm only keeping the real stuff. I handed her the box. This is yours if you want it. For all the moments we're going to build together, the real ones. She took the box and held it like it was made of something precious, which I guess it was. It was made of hope and trust, and the kind of faith that's only possible after you've learned the difference between what's real and what's performance. This time, I said, we build something that lasts. And looking at Sierra holding that box and smiling at me like I was someone worth building a future with, I finally believed it was possible.